Testing, testing. Ashley, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, March 25th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting, and I'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Marlowe? Present. Commissioner Connolly? Here. Commissioner Roden?
Here.
Commissioner Neal? Commissioner Kogler?
Here.
Commissioner Christensen?
Present, yes.
Chairperson Covarrubias?
Here.
The record will reflect Commissioner Neal is absent tonight. He did inform us that he wasn't going to be able to make it tonight.
Awesome. Okay, thank you for that. Staff introductions, please.
Marcy Reynoso and Ashley Peterson, Administrative Assistants.
Warren Frace, Community Development Director.
Darcy Delgado, Associate Planner.
Pepper Smith, Assistant Planner. Keith Bannister, Associate Planner. Leslie Graves.
And this is Andrew Fawcett from the City Attorney's Office.
Excellent.
And Darren Nash, City Planner.
Darren Nash. Thank you, Darren. All right, we're good. let's move on to item E, general public comments regarding matters not on the agenda. Are there any general public comments not on the agenda? Looking in the audience. Seeing none. Marcy, any callers?
There are no callers.
Thank you for that. Item F, are there any agenda items proposed to be tabled or rescheduled?
There are none.
Thank you, sir. Hearing none. All right. Public hearings. All right, we're going to go move on to public hearings. Item H, discussion items. Item number 1, we're going to have a staff presentation. Looks like Darcy, you're going to lead us on this. Home occupation public workshop. Just a reminder for those in attendance, there is a sign-in sheet at the back if you'd like to sign in, as this is a workshop. Feel free to do so. But can we go ahead and get our staff presentation, please?
Great, thank you. Good evening, commissioners. So my name is Darcy. For folks with us tonight, we are the Planning Commission tonight is hosting a public workshop to discuss the home business standards. Just to kind of take you all back, last year, we did a complete overhaul of our zoning code that was adopted by City Council October 1st. And if you recall, that was a comprehensive update of Title 21. So the entire zoning code was repealed and replaced. And one of the things that that was part of that update initially that staff had taken through some workshops with the Planning Commission, if you recall, we had discussed home occupation permit standards. Unfortunately, City Council deferred action on those at their adoption hearing, and the preference at the time was to retain the original home occupation standards. The sentiment was that folks had showed up at the meeting and they weren't really clear as to how some of the changes that staff had proposed and the Planning Commission had recommended regarding home businesses, how it would really what the ramifications would be, more time needed to be spent on it. And so since we adopted the zoning code and we have this, every 6 months we're going to revisit the zoning code, this seemed like a great opportunity to bring the home occupation standards back to the Planning Commission in this public workshop format with the community members to hear input and figure out, do we still need to make changes, or are we okay with the original home occupation standards that we had in place before we started the update process, several years ago. All right, so if you recall, there were some changes that staff was making to the home business standards. We were really, I would say the meat and potatoes of the changes would have changed the types of uses that were allowed or not allowed. So the existing text is somewhat sparse. The list of allowed uses and prohibited uses is pretty thin. And so we had expanded that list, and with that action, we had, taken a look at definitions. What do some of these uses, what are they? How can we define them? Also, we had some of the uses as we started creating them and adding to our list of allowed or not allowed, we also had to create performance standards. So a good example of this would be if you have a home occupation, do we care about how many commercial vehicles could be parked on that property? That's a performance standard that we could have, created if we were to be more detailed in that list of uses of what's allowed, not allowed. Another example would be, if somebody is teaches swim lessons, do we care, if they're having 10-minute sessions, do we care if they have, a certain number of kids in a day, as long as it's only one at a time? That is a performance standard that we could have applied, for instance, for that type of home occupation. So another thing that would have changed with what we had initially proposed and what the City Council ended up not adopting, of course, was clarifying some interpretations of different uses, which would also improve enforceability when it comes to if there's a complaint that we receive from the public and our code enforcement officers are working with planning staff to determine what the standard is. Some of the reasons of why staff initially proposed changes was because we really did think we were going to help kind of clarify these, discrepancies that we had over the years. Where can commercial vehicles be parked? We never really had a standard. So this graphic is just something that is, some options that we had even shown the City Council back when this went through the process last year. So today we have 675 current active home business licenses, and you can see that the spread is really across the city. It's not concentrated in any one area. But to kind of point to our current home business standards that ended up not being changed, the ones that we still have in place today, we don't really have a lot of code enforcement cases. At the time, there's no current code enforcement case. So over the years, it's maybe a handful. It's really minimal. So it kind of points back to the question for the commission and for the, as far as where the workshop is going is there a desire to leave things as they are, being that, we don't have any active code enforcement, maybe we didn't need to make changes, but it seems like we need to give the opportunity for the public to weigh in and for the commission to have lead the discussion. So as you can see, this is the current list. So 5A is the allowed uses, and then 5B would be the businesses that are not permitted as home occupations. If you read through it, it's pretty short, and there's, what's highlighted in both cases is similar uses. Well, this requires a lot of interpretation by our zoning administrator. So again, initially staff was trying to lengthen the list a little bit, add some uses that were kind of what we were seeing more common for applications for home business license, home business occupation, and put those, codify them, put them in the zoning code. But maybe it was fine as it was. And so I think that's what we're here tonight, is to hear from folks about, do we need to make these changes? We did attach what we had recommended last go around in the staff report. So that was attachment 2, just for reference if we need to pull it up tonight during the workshop. So some of the issues that the Planning Commission might think about as we're having this public workshop is whether we want to, as I mentioned, expand the list of allowed uses. Do we want to expand the list of prohibited uses? Also, are there any specific performance standards for any of the uses that we might consider if we're going to expand either list? Do we want to limit the number of customers or frequency of customers coming to receive a service, as I mentioned in the scenario with, swim lessons? So currently the home business section allows teaching and tutoring. So, if it was 30-minute sessions, 10-minute sessions, is it okay that they're every 30 minutes, for an 8-hour day? We don't have those definitions available to staffs, but again, there's not, a lot of code enforcement. Right. So is there a problem with the minimal standards that we have in place? Another theme that we've heard over the years was, whether or not we should limit the number of commercial vehicles that can be kept at the property. We have a lot of contractors in the city, a lot of home businesses that, that's something that should be considered. Also, do we want to specify the location of where someone could park their commercial vehicle? So just a few things to think about, not an exhaustive list, but just to kind of steer the discussion. All right, so what are the next steps? So here we're having this public workshop tonight. The Planning Commission, we're hoping will, take public comments tonight and advise staff as to whether, do we need to just leave the home business standards as they are? Was it broken? Are we okay with, with the status quo? Or do we think that we need to make some changes to the business standards, and what staff would be looking for are specific recommendations? We had a first pass last time, and that went to City Council, and that kind of got pushed back on. So it seems like that wasn't the right recommendation. So we would want some more specific recommendations if we're going to revisit that and make some more changes. And then overall, we're also just looking to hear from the public tonight. So we're hoping that folks here in the audience will voice any concerns they have, ask questions, and really just open this up, kind of an informal meeting as public workshops tend to be. And as it was mentioned, we do have a sign-in sheet in the back, because if there is any future meeting where action is taken, we could notify anyone who's provided their email address or a home address. We can send you a notification. So tonight, there's no formal action happening, so nothing will change with the zoning code. We would have to renotice, and it would have to go through a public hearing. So tonight's not a public hearing, it's just a workshop. And with that, I'll conclude staff's presentation. And we're going to have Katie helping take notes as we hear from the public, but otherwise, back to you, Commissioner Covarrubias.
Darcy, thank you for that. So I think what we're going to do is, unless any of the commissioners have a short, quick question of staff, I think what I'd like to do is open it up to the public, because I'm going to assume if you're here tonight, you might have a comment or two to make. So I think it would probably be good to get some public comment first, maybe see if there's any callers, get some comment from them, take all of that, give us a second to absorb it, and then we'll start with commissioner comments. So I think if everybody's on board with that, let's go ahead and open it up for public comment. If you'd like to make a comment, step up to the podium, give your name, who you are, and proceed with your comments. Marcy, they got 3 minutes, correct? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Linda George, 3126 Spring Street. I'm a little confused. We know what happened at the city council when the, especially the pet sitter was rejected. But when I looked at the paperwork before we came here, the only thing that's on there is that the jobs that were in contention were removed. So we don't know if there's, some have heard that there's supposed to be regulations for the pet sitter, such as, 8 people or eight dogs or business hours. So it's kind of difficult to comment, not knowing what the current language is. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Sorry, thank you for that. Anybody else in the public? Name and address, please.
Yeah, Jeff Carr, Paso Robles. Overall, I like the stripped down. Well, I probably like the regulations now the way they are from the way they were in the past versus the new regulations. I thought they really went too far and started. It was with the prohibited businesses, and because actually there were some businesses doing that already. So there seemed to be some confusion. If you looked at the licensing documents that the city had, that there were people doing, for instance, they had all home occupations for oil changes, mobile oil changes and such things, and pet sitting, things that they were suddenly prohibiting. And it seemed a little arbitrary to me. So I'm glad I like it more into this more lean version. I've had home businesses many times. Mine are very simple, just a desk and a computer, no visitors. But I've seen lots of the regulations in different cities in LA and Orange County and San Diego. I've had home businesses. And most of all, the big thing is to try to make it so the home business does not look like a business. You want to just stay in tune with the neighborhood. You don't want to have anything that screams, this is a business here. And so usually, if you make that clear, if other home occupations start adding requirements, then they'll add things that just seem to more try to be specific about that or emphasize that, and maybe they're necessary, maybe they're not. A lot of times they react to people that just aren't getting it, that they need to have it look like a business. That might be to do with vehicles. It might have to do with how many visitors are allowed. And it might have to do with, the parking is obviously a big thing. So those are just things to emphasize, making it look like there's no business being done there. And those are useful if they do make a point. They just don't become just a bunch of regulations that you got to look at. The one concern I do have in the permits here, I was a little concerned about things like you can't have certain home businesses, but you can have them, say, if you're just doing the office work for that business and you're doing the actual work outside the business. And then we had things like a barber shop, for instance, or a beauty shop. They're prohibited. Well, but I could have my business I'm a barber, but I have a chair that I rent in a store location. Or can I still be a barber and go to somebody's home? Or is just doing any kind of barber work at a home prohibited? Or could I go to another business, say a care facility for seniors, and do my barber work? So that's kind of ambiguous here when they say, well, there's no barber work allowed. It seems ambiguous to me in these requirements. And the other thing that I've had too is like the automotive repair was one that I picked that just seemed too broad. There is a definition in the, finishing up here, there is a definition for an automotive garage, which talks about, getting into vehicles and dismantling vehicles and working on them. But just automotive repair is so broad. In my opinion, you pull a part out of a car and there's a lot of parts that you can still do a home business with, doing either repair or rebuilding. And I say that because I've come across a lot of those in restoration of a motorcycle that I'm working on and getting into that community of people who are working in those fields of restoration. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I think there was a question from the first speaker that maybe we could clarify that might help with the discussion a little bit. So what's on the screen right now is the existing home occupation rules. So those were the original rules that the council chose just to roll over into the new code. So there are no proposed changes tonight. Basically, the question is, should the code as rolled over by the council stay as is, or do we want to add it or make any changes to it? So the code is very streamlined. So 5A, these are the allowable home occupation uses, and they basically are just kind of in this list right here, as Darcy's talked about. And then at the end, it says similar uses, and that's where we just kind of have that broad catch-all that's up to staff to interpret. And then 5B are not permitted, and that's where we've got the animal hospitals, the engine repair, those sorts of things. So that's the current code today. That's been the code for the last 20-odd years, and that's the question tonight is, do we want to stick with this or not? So I think that's the discussion we're looking to have tonight.
Okay. Thank you for that clarity, Warren. All right, last chance for public here in the room. I seeing none. Marcy, we have some callers?
Yes, we do. Give
Okay.
me just one moment. Maria, can you hear us? Maria?
I can hear you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment and some kind of question. With the new government, I do have a home-based business, and since they're scrutiny on any extra positions within the city and the government, are there going to be any extra extra positions that are going to coming up for home business or people?
Maria, apologies. I'm not sure I'm understanding the question. Can you repeat the question specifically?
Are there going to be any extra rules for home business people?
Oh, got it. Just rules in general?
If you guys going to add any extra ones? Yes.
So tonight we're not going to make any changes formally. We're having a discussion on whether or not we want to recommend any changes. So nothing's changing tonight. It's more of a workshop just to discuss any possible changes one way or the other.
Oh, okay. Changes for the best for the business owners.
I'm sorry?
Changes for the best.
For the pets?
For the business owner. For the best.
Okay, changes for the best. Got it. Yes, hopefully.
Yes.
Yes, if any changes, hopefully for the best. Yes. Yeah. Do you have any recommendations?
Thank you. No, not right now. I just wanted to hear what's going on and if there are any changes and what are those.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Marcy, we got any other callers? No other callers? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and close the public portion of this. We'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. Who would like to get us started off here? Anybody? Okay. Commissioner Conley?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have about 4 comments here. If you consider a business to be a certain box or category, I think some businesses don't really necessarily fit in a box. I mean, you couldn't put all the businesses down that there are out there. And so it becomes an issue of how does this business fit in this box, quote unquote. So I see that as a problem. Like, for example, you could have no barber business in a residential area, and yet somebody could do nails. It could be someone taking appointments to do nails or pedicures. Does that fall under barber? What box does that fit under? And you can come up with hundreds of of businesses where you can't really say, because it's in this code or permit, that it fits that box. So that's one comment. The other comment I have is that some businesses that may fit in a box may never cause a problem. Somebody could maybe, if auto repair is in the prohibited side of things, they could fix, like one gentleman mentioned, they could fix a small part and have a business doing small parts, doing auto repair. So some businesses may fit in a box but never cause a problem. So it never have a complaint from a neighbor. So my third comment is that some businesses may be allowed or fit in a box and do cause a problem because they cause excessive noise, or they have too many customers, or they have too many vehicles parked in front of their property. So that's a third problem. And the fourth problem could be that some businesses may have no problem from their neighbors if it's during normal daylight hours, but if they do that same business at night, then it could be a problem. So those are my 4 comments. And I've written them down if you need them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pro-business, and I know the cost of things have become very expensive, and renting places can be expensive, and I think it would be good to see maybe a list of the businesses or some of the business license we have, because the way it is right now is a bit on the vague side, but I like to caution more towards allowing things. I know there's on the list here, one of them was like 6 suggestions of not including our massage, right? And I don't know if we have home business massages here. I'd be curious, but I know I had a massage therapist back where I grew up who had a little accessory dwelling unit, and I got massages out of her home, and it was a very nice, quaint little practice. And I thought it was a good thing, and it was a successful thing. So to Commissioner Conley's point is there's so many different ways to approach this. And obviously if you're doing haircuts and you're doing 20 haircuts in a day and people are in and out, that might be disruptive. So, I'd be in favor of maybe expanding the allowable uses, but, reducing, because like we could add personal training. So those are 1-hour sessions. Maybe we limit it to there's six people per day or 8 people per day. And that limits it to a reasonable amount where there's not just a high amount of traffic going through a home. So I guess my question to staff would be, are there home massage therapists in the city right now? Is that, because it doesn't specify one way or another with the code as it sits from the way I read it, and maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Right, so it's not on the list. I believe that, and Katie might correct me if I'm wrong, massage is a one that our police department usually vets through, at least for brick and mortar businesses. It's not on this list, so I'm assuming it's just not allowed. Is that correct, Katie? Is that how you? Yeah.
So to that point, I would be in favor of making that an allowable use personally, and I'm not sure everyone feels the same way. And for instance, my wife just started a marketing business. Now she leaves the home, and so she's not really conducting business at our resident, but if she had a nice space in there, an accessory dwelling unit, it might be nice for her to take meetings, not go into a coffee shop or having a brick and mortar or things like that. So it becomes challenging, again, because the way people could utilize that, and I don't have the answer. That's what I'm asking my fellow commissioners, is what they might suggest. Maybe there was a way that we could open this up, because I'd be in favor of allowing more people to have businesses, because that's important to me, and I think it's important to the community. And I know things are expensive, and maybe if you're only doing, like, some hairstylists might only see 2 people in a day. Is that really going to impact the neighborhood? Is there going to be a negative impact on that? No, I don't think so. But then again, I know people can cut a lot of hair really quickly. That would be a lot of people coming through. So that's kind of my thought on it. I'd be curious to see what my other commissioners think, and see if there's a way that we could find a way of integrating those to what's allowed now. And again, to staff, if there was an ability, maybe on the next workshop, if we have another workshop, to just maybe get a list of all the business license out there or of something of that sort, so I could look at that and see, okay, they do allow these things, or these things are happening, or these things I don't see. So those are some of my points and some of the things I'd like to hear more about.
Commissioner Marl, thank you. Mr. Roden, do you have anything?
I think getting the list of business licenses is kind of key, because I don't like an open-ended similar issues. You get yourself in trouble in not being specific, I think. I think two of the issues that we discussed on the council that was sent back were the commercial vehicle parking. The 10,000 pound limit is less than a 1-ton vehicle loaded out. I don't know what vehicles we're ordinarily talking about, if it's vans, if it's 3/4 trunk, truck and trailer or whatever. I do have to say that I worry about, and this is overstepping maybe, but I'd worry about trailers being parked out on the street, because it lends itself open to things getting stolen, creating maybe an environment in the neighborhood that it wasn't there before, with accessibility to certain things that may not even be in our purview. But as long as you're staying within your property, I would say that it would be fine to have 2 vehicles that were parked out in front of your house, or in a garage or behind a fence. But you get much more than that, and it may become a thoroughfare for a lot of things. As far as the non-kennel daily pet sitting, I don't know how many exist in the city that we know of. The limits for, as I understand, for me as a citizen in town is 3 dogs, 3 cats. I don't know that, I know everybody says, well, we just leave it up to the neighbors to complain, but that may not serve the neighborhood well. We may need to think about having definitions as to what's allowable and what is not. If that's 9 dogs, that's fine. If it's 6 dogs, then or 4 dogs, whatever it is. But I kind of like seeing things finite, whatever they are, and they can change. If you want to change that policy in the future, or the zoning, then we can do that. But to have definition and no ambiguity is so much more important to me than the thing itself.
Thank you for that. Looking to my right, Commissioner Kogler.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First, a question for staff. You mentioned that we'd have relatively few active code enforcement cases or haven't really had many over time. The way those come about is by resident complaint only, correct? There's no active inspections the city does. So it has to rise to the threshold of a neighbor being concerned enough and maybe have the gumption enough to make a complaint against their next door neighbor, which creates some balance problems at times. But that's the only way, correct?
9 times out of 10, it would be less common for, let's say, code enforcement to stumble upon, like a community services officer to stumble upon maybe a commercial vehicle that's not supposed to be parked on a certain street. Maybe it's oversized. Very unlikely that they're, I'm not sure if they're doing active code enforcement, but we're not doing active planning, and largely community services is not doing active code enforcement. It is all complaint driven.
Okay. All right. And then enlighten me a little bit more on the problems you have right now enforcing the existing ordinance that's there. The existing ordinance doesn't specifically talk about commercial vehicles. So it's not whether it's behind a fence or in the garage, because it's not a factor at this very moment. You mentioned the ambiguity, and I totally understand it, of that lovely phrase, or similar uses. I know that one can be a problem. That one, maybe we can make some inroads with some of the suggestions that have been offered about getting a better feel for what's out there, what's being done, what's good, what's bad. But it seems like you're always going to have some kind of caveat that says we can't encompass everything, so we have to make some reasonable determinations. So then it boils down for me always back to basic zoning, that home occupation is an accessory use to a residential structure. The principal use is a residential structure. The integrity of that use and its surrounding neighbors is maintained as residential. So that sets a bar that becomes hard to define as, okay, what begins to knock it out of that? Is it products stored in the front yard? That's not allowed today. So that's not an enforcement problem. Somebody's got drums sitting in the front yard, you can go out and you can tell those have to be removed. The use thing is where I get hung up as my fellow commissioners too, is, what can we prescribe as allowed and what's not allowed? And I think the better we can define that, the better off we'll be with code enforcement going forward and people understanding what they can and can't do. Personally, I think there have been a number of issues talked about with pet sitting and so forth. And I think that's pretty commonplace that pet sitting is allowed. I do think there's a definition, though, of the scale of that. It probably has to be a part of that. You can say you can have 3 dogs and 3 cats, and maybe you do, and maybe that menagerie lives pretty well together because they live together every day. But if you bring 6 different animals in, it's a totally different dynamic, and maybe there's noise and things associated with that. I don't really know. So again, but I think some level of pet sitting is certainly appropriate for this kind of thing because it happens literally everywhere. So I would be interested too in a better catalog, I guess, of the uses that are out there and what we might do. I do have a bias, I think, towards some level of restrictions on the number of commercial vehicles. I can't see that having, a number, and I don't know enough about the dynamics of what's the gross weight, what's the size. I see the common utility trucks running around that contractors use that are basically bigger pickups with a lot of storage on the side, some bed area in the middle. Maybe they've got a welder in the back or a hoist on it or whatever. You get 2, 3, 4 of those in a neighborhood at one house is disruptive to the integrity of the residential component of the neighborhood. So I think some definition there, which I'm not really qualified probably to say where that line is drawn and what. I think some line does have to be considered, some line maybe has to be drawn. I certainly would support anything that we can do to make the enforcement side easier by being as specific as we can and by accommodating as many things we can without turning this into some kind of giant voluminous ordinance. So I think there are tweaks that need to be done to the existing ordinance the way it is right now. I don't know that it rises to the point of the draft that we had earlier, probably not, but maybe there's some middle ground if we can identify some of these specific uses that we can work on. So, thank you.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. Commissioner Christensen?
And see, I'm glad you went before me because you asked the one question I was going to emphasize. One of the things that I was curious about is with the number of licenses we have now, what have been some of the code enforcement issues that have been, if we can culminate them into a list of, hey, these have been issues over the years that seem to be greater than others. I think that would help on the decision-making process as well. And as I'm listening here, when I was reading this, I was writing notes and then I was listening to my fellow commissioners and I listened to the public and I'm hearing a number of things and I think we're kind of all talking about some of the similar concerns, and yet at the same time, I know there's a difference in perspective. A couple commissioners would really like to have clear definition on a lot of things, and some commissioners would like to have a little more leeway. And I think in the end, a lot of it seems to be circulating around process as well, and that seems to be a large issue. If you look at the base of what we're talking about, how do we deal with this? We're not currently doing a lot of code enforcement in that regard. I know in the new code, we talked about having the ability to do an inspection. You always like having that kind of stuff in your arsenal if that's something that's necessary to follow up occasionally. I think that a city should be able to do that. On the other hand, one of the things that one of the persons from the public notated was liking the current zoning, and I kind of in some ways agree with that in the sense that there is some the way it sits now, it's not overly defined so that we're dealing with all the little caveats that Commissioner Conley were bringing up that don't fit in the box or maybe fit in the box and could be an issue. So again, in my mind, I keep coming back to process. And there, I think, of course, we can define some of these uses a little bit better. Obviously, I don't think an animal hospital fits in a neighborhood, business, and a large automotive repair I don't think fits, in a tavern and a restaurant, although maybe if there was a tavern a half a block from my house, it'd be easier to go out at night. But I think process to me is a big part of this, and having the ability to allow that homeowner to come in and be able to make a case for the home business if it doesn't fit entirely into that box, and the city and or planning commission and staff being able to say, well, we see how this could be something that could be non-detrimental. It fits in the neighborhood, like one of the persons from the public said, it's in the neighborhood, but you're not supposed to know it's kind of a business. It's supposed to fit in, and I think that's a core part of what I think we all want to see. There's definitely an issue between east side and west side. I can see that, especially with commercial vehicles, because I know that that's an issue. I would have a problem if there's a lot of big trucks parking on my street in front of my house. That I remember when Enterprise Car would do that. I live on Oak, and it was a constant battle with them. I'd have 20 cars parked out in front of our houses that were Enterprise rental cars. So obviously I was not happy about that. So that is a concern, especially if they're on the street, on the public right of way. And I feel that there are some properties, maybe on the east side, they've got a lot of room. They could fit 1 or 2 trucks. Probably you wouldn't even really see them. At the same time, Commissioner Koger had a very good point. That could get out of control, and we have to have a way to be able to rein that in. I feel like some of the uses, for example, like massage, or I had this was some years back, a Reiki massage. I don't know if you know what that is, but anyway, and it was in the person's studio at their home, and it's the same scenario. It was comforting. Then I've also worked with a physical therapist at their home. So some of those things sometimes can work. And the problem I think we face is there's been so much change in the way people do business today with technology. How do we rein that in? How do we, take some kind of control in the sense that there's a lot of businesses that are created that don't involve big trucks and don't involve, 5 dogs, that I think can fit into neighborhoods. But if we started going and creating this list, I'm not sure we'd ever end. And I don't know how we how do we define that, the ones that we want to define or think that could be detrimental, but at the same time leave ourselves that flexibility that we need to support our population and our community when they have a conceptual idea and want to have it at their home, and it would work. So that's kind of what I'm struggling with right now. And I don't know that I have the answer, but I'm glad we're talking about it.
Okay, Commissioner, thank you. So before I make some comments, I want to remind the commission that we've got 2 responsibilities, or we're being asked to do 2 things today. One, if we don't desire that there be any changes, and that we're going to agree that the home business standards, we can leave them as they are, and then no further meetings are going to be required or workshops. 2, we can make some recommended specific changes or ask the staff to do some more digging on a specific item so that they can have the time to properly do that, and then they then will bring back a presentation to the commission again for review and consideration. So it's been a lot of great comments by the audience, great comments from the commission, but at some point we've got to be able to give staff some directive on whether or not we want to make some formal changes, or at least have staff review, investigate, and then be able to come back with their findings, and then we can then have another discussion on it. So with that said, think about that as I make a couple of comments here. Darcy, you mentioned that there's 675 current business licenses in our city. It's a lot of work, but I'd be curious. The first thing I thought was, one, I didn't know there were that many. Not that we could ever find out. I'd be surprised if there aren't a couple of hundred non-permitted activities going on in our city. But out of the 675, curiosity tells me, what's the breakdown of that 675? Do we seem to have an isolated, specific type of business that just seems to be commonplace in our community as a home business. Of the 675, is there one that really sticks out?
So the most common one is the home office for services that are provided outside of the home. So a lot of things people are doing on the internet and that their home is just their base. It's the paramount home business occupation that somebody would get. When we went through the exercise last go around with the zoning code update, which maybe Warren can scroll down to attachment 2, and we can look at what, the expanded list. So what we had tried to do last time was think about, which we had another planner who routinely, received the business licenses. So she knew what was coming in, what was coming out. So we tried to add to that list some of the things that we were seeing, but then also if we were going to the zoning administrator, which in this case is our community development director, Warren Frace, and repeat, this is not an allowed use, we also then added that to the not allowed list, because it was something that we wanted to, in a sense, codify so that as staff, turnover, that we can be consistent with that interpretation and not have to research it every time, the last time we got a request for a certain use. So it's never going to be exhaustive. We'll always be chasing a list because, as mentioned tonight, there's a lot of innovative businesses that just continue to come out, and that's this home occupation opportunity is great for people to get started. Also, the enforceability, having something to enforce and point to for if code enforcement is asking if something's allowed or not, we can. If they need to apply for a business license, we can then be a little bit more proactive in our response of, well, no, it's not allowed because it's here in our zoning code. But also if the list isn't very long, we're just, it kind of takes some time to get feedback to find out if something's going to work or not. So we thought we went through and tried to finesse and do things based on, or make changes based on, just our general knowledge of how home occupation businesses and how they're applied for in our city, very specific to Paso Robles. And, this was our first, not our first pass, because we probably worked on it several times, but this was kind of our best guess of what we thought could improve. If we were going to make changes, this was it. But it sounded like at city council that there, either, I'm not sure if there was just a desire to keep it as is, and Commissioner Roden, maybe you can bring everyone up to speed since you were at that meeting. But defaulting to what we had in place was the answer at the time. So we can certainly revisit attachment 2. It's really here for context tonight. It's not supposed to serve as staff's recommendation. We don't have a recommendation for you, but just to remind you all kind of where we started when we were trying to expand this section of our zoning code.
Thank you for that, Darcy. And looking at attachment 2, me personally, I like it that you tried to get a little bit more detail and specific with, right, here's the standard. And I think that's probably one of the challenges that we have most, because I think in conversation with Katie earlier, just having some general conversation, the hard part is I think that staff too often is left up to their own interpretation. Right. And I think that's what we're trying to solve here a little bit, is not to so much leave it up to interpretation, but have a clear defined, here's the standard, right? Do you meet the standard or not? And so I think that's the challenge. One of the things I think that is one of the challenges is, so if you have a home business that, and I think somebody in the public comment made this comment, if the business is not disruptive to the neighborhood, meaning they're quiet, kind of fly under the radar, you don't even know maybe it even exists. I think where you run into challenges is when that home business has frequent visitors, meaning cars coming and going, people coming and going. My question is, would it be prudent to try to add something that is very descriptive to, hey, a home business can't have, 6 visitors in a 24-hour period of time. I don't know if that's asking too much, but if we're trying to do that with, for example, just as an example, daycare for up to 14 children, pet sitting that does not constitute a kennel, right? I like that we're specific or trying to be specific. Could we do the same? Is it realistic to be able to give that empowerment to neighbors to say, I don't mind if you have home business, But holy cow, now you've got 12 people coming and going every hour, right? Or every 3 hours. Is that something that could be prudent, do you think? Just your thought.
So certainly it would give staff the ability to receive an application and then either approve it or deny it, because every home business application is different. So we do have when somebody wants to apply for a home business, they're getting a business license with the city, then they fill out a home occupation application, and they're being a little bit more descriptive in what their use is. And so, for instance, somebody who does teaching and tutoring, maybe they only have 3 or 4 lessons a day versus someone who's doing swim lessons. Again, just throwing this out there because I know young kids can only swim for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. So in theory, you could have, dozens of kids coming all day throughout the day, very different type of teaching going on, but they're serving one pupil at a time, for instance. So what staff does is we ask and clarify and put notes into our approval of the application, as long as it fits into one of the, approved teaching tutoring is allowed. So we would ask, and if they say, well, I would have, maybe eight, no more than 8 a day, no more than 8 pupils a day, and they're usually, staggered 1 an hour, we'll put that in. And so if in the future there's any complaint, we can we can look at it and point back, well, this is what they were approved for. But it's kind of an arbitrary standard for each person who then says, well, I only teach 6 people, or I teach 6 people a day. And the next person says, well, I can teach 10. So by not having a standard, you are making it super flexible. But staff doesn't have we don't have anything that says that you can't have 12 students in a day or 15 students in a day if it seems reasonable.
Yeah, the challenge is, and I think Commissioner Marlowe mentioned this, like him, I am pro-business as well. I mean, I love our community. One of the things that I love about our community is the ability to do business in our community, right? I love it. And I don't have a problem with a home business. I have an office downtown, but there are days like today where I spent most of the day from home. Didn't have any visitors, client-wise, so it was a very simple day at home, working, doing my normal thing. So, I'm not against home businesses in general. In fact, I encourage them, but I understand the disruptive nature that some of them can present to neighbors. And I think the challenge is that neighbors sometimes feel handcuffed, that they don't have a way to enforce it, right? And so I think that's the challenge. Anything we can do to be more descriptive in the do's and don'ts and the numbers, specific numbers, I think, of visitors, I think could be helpful. At least that's a step, in my opinion, in the right direction, right? Because there's got to be some sense of common sense. If you're pet sitting, right, and you want to operate it as a business, then okay, let's come up with a parameter. Maybe it's 6 or 8 dogs. I agree with, I think, Commissioner Christensen, or somebody said you get 6 or 7 different breeds that are unfamiliar with each other in a house. I think that can be very dangerous and get dogs act in mysterious ways sometimes. So how do we make sure that doesn't become a problem in a neighborhood, right? Heavy equipment, I think, is a challenge in a lot of communities. It is not infrequent to see heavy equipment vehicles parked on our roadways, 2 or 3 or 4. And I think that's a challenge. How do we enforce that? One personal quick question, Darcy. So I have somebody that I know that does garage sales once a month, every month, from about start of spring to just the beginning of fall. Every month that person has a garage sale. And the traffic every Saturday is horrendous on that Saturday. That person, I'm just curious, they don't have to apply for a license, do they? Or should they?
So I guess in theory, if they're 2, is it in the code, Katie? They have 2 a year? You can have 2 garage sales a year.
Interesting. I did not know that, and I guarantee she doesn't know that, or they don't know that. So, yeah, I was curious. So somebody like that, but they don't necessarily have to apply for a license to do that, right?
So if it was something that somebody's routinely selling, it seems like...
Oh, they've turned it into a money-making opportunity.
Yeah, so we have, in the current code that talks about you can only use a certain square footage of your home and it, you know, for your business. And so if you're storing a lot of things to then sell, it seems like it probably wouldn't fit under a home business that would, you know.
Got it.
It's one of those that we would have to, you know, make an interpretation.
Right.
But just what I'm hearing, it's sounding less likely like a viable business.
Oh, I've watched it grow over the years, and all of a sudden now it's every Saturday on a specific Saturday.
The current code does say that there are no retail sales other than for cottage foods. So that is in the existing code. Like you said, people can have 2 garage sales a year, but that would not constitute a home business.
Got it. Okay. Sorry for that personal. I won't be having a discussion with that neighbor soon, but just out of curiosity. Okay, let's go ahead, and that was all the questions I have for now. So let's bring it back to the entire commission again. So I'll reiterate, we've got 2 choices. We recommend that we leave things the way they are and don't recommend any changes, anything for staff to further investigate, or we need to be specific on areas that we do think needs more work so that the staff has time to prepare that. And then, of course, we have another workshop. So, Commissioner Kogler.
Before you launch into that, if I may, one more question of staff. Are we using the current application and permit as effectively as we can? Whether we add more permitted or disallowed uses, whether or not we limit the number of commercial vehicles, could we use the existing structure we have with an application and a permit to better have a checklist for those things? And maybe it's the number of visits per day, or maybe it's the number of trucks parked on site and where those are. And can we catalog those as part of the permit? So if they get wildly outside of that, almost like a conditional use permit at a much more minor scale, you'd have the ability to say, wait a minute, this is no longer in alignment and we need to do something. You need to do something. Are we using it as effectively as we can?
Probably not as effective as we can. It's still, I would say it's just notes. And in some cases I could see where we might ask for a site plan to say, well, where are you storing, you know, you have a construction trailer, maybe a landscape business. And so I used to review business licenses. I you know, you ask the question, well, where do you store it? And they say, oh, it's behind a fence. And, you know, so you can make those notations. I don't know how many instances we would maybe collect a little bit more to you know, maybe getting a plot plan and having more information provided. But I would say we don't have a standard. So it's kind of, you know, as needed, we might vet them out a little bit. And then if there, as you said, if there's a complaint, then we can go back and say, well, this is what you said you were doing, and you've gone beyond that. You've intensified it.
Okay. It seems we've got a reasonable structure maybe in place. And did all of the dots on that map you showed, were all of those really where there are permits and applications? Okay, great, thank you.
Commissioner Christensen.
Yeah, I had one other item, couple things. I would say that per the new code concept that was presented, you know, everything from 21.040 and down, to me, I feel like there's a lot of good language in there. And I feel like you guys have made a really good attempt of trying to address process as that part. If I would make a recommendation, the 21.030B at the very end, you know, it talks about exception for hardship. I guess my question then to staff is there an exception for, like we're talking about, if that round peg doesn't fit in the square hole, or vice versa, a square peg in a round hole, whatever, you know, what is that? And I would say maybe we consider that as part of that process. I would recommend that we, you know, maybe look at developing some kind of guideline for that. Maybe it goes before DRC or something like that. And I really like Kogler's concept of collecting the data at the time of application. I think that's, again, part of the process to help in the process long term to deal with any potential issues. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and go to Commissioner Marlowe.
All right, I got some notes here. So I think that, to Commissioner Kogler's point and Christensen, that I would be in favor, first off, of another workshop with more data and more information about the process. I think in that data, having a copy of the permit and business license applications in the agenda would be helpful. to see what it currently, I mean, I'm sure I could go look it up, but to see what it currently looks like, and maybe we can make some suggestions on the change of that. I think that I had on here, like, if there are hardships or questionable businesses, have a process to which staff, maybe doesn't feel comfortable making a determination one way or another, that it can come to DRC or Planning Commission or council of some sort, because there might be businesses that aren't in the box or fit in the box or don't fit in the box that would be a benefit to the community in a way and not disruptive to the neighborhood. Because that's the point, is we want people to make money and earn a living, but we don't want to disrupt the people around them. And if there's people who can do that in a way that isn't clearly defined on this, we want to be able to hear them out, and we want to support the community in the best way we can. I think that's important. So with that, I do think that there's a lot of good language here. It's a good first start. One other thing I thought would be interesting, I don't know how easy it would be to get. I'd also like to see a list of the denied applications. I'm not sure how you would do that, but that might be something interesting to take a look at, just to see kind of a combination of what's approved, what's denied, and how people are executing those business licenses and how that's working. So I'd be in favor of another workshop. I'd be in favor of a little bit more data. I think, to Commissioner Christensen's point, a lot of this language, it creates a structure, it creates a process, it'll make it easier. And then I think we can take all that information, all the notes that were written down here by Katie, she's doing a great job. I can hear her squiggling away. And I think that those are all really, really good points. I think everyone here is pretty aligned. I think we all do. Well, I believe that there would be some adjustments that would make it beneficial for you guys, for staff. It would be beneficial for the community and would allow us to, continue to support everybody. So I think that, there's other things I had on here. Just for instance, in my neighborhood, I have a daycare a couple doors down. I have no idea really how many people are there. I really don't know. It could be a lot. It could be a little. They're basically quiet. So I think that, people can operate businesses in lots of different ways. So that's basically it. Those are my comments. And I think that there's a good direction here. And I think that there was a positive meeting I think there'll be a good outcome to this. So thanks.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. Commissioner Conley?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at some of the things on the board and what we talked about, and I don't really have a whole lot to add, but what I do see is some common concerns is parking. And parking has two issues: the number of vehicles that are parked and the location of where it's parked. And then related to that is the size of the commercial vehicles. So those are some common things we're talking about. And I don't know if hardship process is the same as an appeal process, but I think that if someone's denied, that if they have a good argument for an appeal, there should be some type of appeal or hardship process. They could be reconsidered for that application to get approval. So that's kind of, and the last thing I think should be considered is hours of operation. That would be like some businesses, they're appropriate during daylight hours, say 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., but outside of those hours, I think they may not be appropriate. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Roden?
I'm going to probably echo a lot of what the last two commissioners talked about, but my notes are really about specificity. I don't want there to be a whole lot of wiggle room. Number of dogs allowed. I'd like to see inspections because that would be a possible health and safety issue. Hours of operation, you just said that. I know a lot of times people will drop their children or dogs off before they go to work and pick them up, so they may be longer hours. But whatever that business constitute what it does, there should be some sort of hours of operation and still fit into the neighborhood. Again, that was mostly my notes. is try to be as specific as possible so that, and you can't, and you may not be able to cover every single aspect. Just may not be possible. But if at all possible, take the wiggle room out of it and make it clear and concise to those who are applying for the business license, so there isn't any interruption or discussion later on.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. I have another question. I like the draft. I think you're headed, definitely, staff is headed in the right direction. I would propose that you continue with this draft and enhance it a little bit more with the things and the comments that have been made tonight. One noticeable thing here on the disallowed or prohibited business, I don't see anything mentioned about cannabis. Is that listed in here somewhere? Did I miss that? Is that something that we prohibit from a home operation thing?
Yeah, by definition, it's prohibited. Based on the state licensing requirements, it requires a commercial location to operate.
Right. So when you have something like that that is a state licensed thing, we don't necessarily have to spell it out in something like this. We can just refer to it's a state license. Okay. I just want to make sure. Okay, perfect. So I think a proposal tonight could be, again, that we recommend to staff possibly that we continue with the draft that you're proposing, look to enhance the draft, continue to enhance it with some of the recommendations and thoughts that have been presented tonight. I like the idea of maybe adding something to the effect of number of visitors to a household on call it a 24-hour period, call it an 8-hour period, call it during the daytime hours versus the night. Whatever we think is reasonable and enforceable, because I think that's part of the challenge, is we can put whatever we want in writing, but is it actually something we can enforce, right? And then give our neighbors, give our people in our community something that they can actually, act on if they needed to, and feel confident that the city can enforce it. Does that make sense? Okay. Before I go on, I think Commissioner Christensen had another comment.
I was just going to ask, Warren, do we need to, if we're going to motion on this, do we need to, would we need a vote with a motion, or can we just, is the chair able to just recommend the staff we do another workshop?
You can do it either way. This workshop, it's very informal. It would be good, though, to have some clear direction with consensus, just so that we actually go off in the right direction.
Okay. And before I do that, just teeing off of the chair's comments, I understand where the chair is coming from in regards to number of people. My fear is, there's a fine line there of creating neighborhood police monitoring too much. I think it's kind of well known if there's somebody's getting too much traffic, like yard sales too often. But if we, being careful in how we do that, so that you don't have somebody sitting out there in a lawn chair like counting cars. I would like to move that we ask staff to revisit with the recommendations that have been brought by the public and planning commissioners, and come back for another workshop discussion with some of the items that were requested. For example, list of the applications that we have now, any list of, primary code issues. And I think there was one other request. Was there something else that you had, Commissioner Marlowe?
The current application and permit process.
The current application,
and then
yes.
Rejected ones if possible. I know that's probably a little harder.
That's my motion.
Chair, I'll second that. And in doing so, I'll also take my moment of comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's okay.
It's real simple. You had asked the question at the beginning. We had a couple of options. One was, do we favor the existing ordinance? I would just say that I think we're headed in a better direction with the comments, so I would be supportive of that direction there. Second.
Perfect. Well said. Is there any other discussion?
I have one question.
Commissioner Roden?
Does a home business have to notify neighbors that business exists, that they have a business there?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments before we go to vote? Warren, was that motion clear enough? Was that definitive enough?
Who was the second?
Commissioner Kogler. Okay, we've got a first and a second. Roll call.
Commissioner Christensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Kogler,
Aye.
Commissioner Marlowe,
Aye.
Commissioner Connolly,
Aye.
Commissioner Roden,
Aye.
Chairperson Covarrubias.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for their comments.
May I interject? I'm sorry, in the next workshop, can we have your comments first and then do public comment? In the next workshop?
yeah.
But thank you for voting, that's
Okay,
awesome.
thank you. All right, thank you. Okay, we'll close that. That item, discussion item is done. We'll move on now. All right, let's jump into next item, the consent calendar.
There are no items.
No items on the consent calendar? Okay. Other reports, Paso Robles Street, Streetscape and Ad Hoc Committee,
No report on that tonight.
Housing Constraints and Opportunities Committee.
Yeah, so we are working on adopting formal bylaws for the operation of the Housing Constraints and Opportunities Committee. That's going to be, I believe, on the April 15th council agenda. That'll specify the terms of members, the appointment process, and then based on that, we'll then start to reconvene the committee for meetings.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions on the Development Review Committee rotation schedule? Any concerns? Anybody need anything? Commissioner Kogler?
Yeah, I had mentioned at our last meeting that I had conflicts on April 7th and the 14th, and I believe the chair generously offered to take the 7th, if you're still available to do so, but the 14th still needs to be covered, or I offered to wholesale change out months with somebody if they wanted to.
Okay, I am absolutely still available for April 7th, so I will cover that for you.
Thank you, sir.
Can anybody help with the 14th?
I cannot.
Commissioner Roden, that's a go. So Commissioner Roden will cover you on the 14th.
Thank you.
Any other changes?
I was going to say, wait.
Roden's already on it.
Oh.
This is April. Never mind.
No? All right, we can check with Commissioner Neal, see if he can help out. If not, it looks like it might be two of us. Or two on that specific day.
I just have a comment on it, and I've kind of voiced this around, but I work in Arroyo Grande, and it would be really helpful if it was pushed back 30 minutes. I don't know how staff feels about that. I don't know how the other commissioners do, but I figured I'd just throw it out there. Moving it for my benefit, it's not necessarily good for everybody, but it would be helpful for me if there was a 30-minute adjustment to that. But I understand if there's not.
It's 3:30. Mm-hmm. Okay, anything else on that? All right, we're good. All right, any final planning commissioner comments? Looking to my left, Commissioner Marlowe?
Yeah, I just thought that was a really productive conversation. Staff did a great job. Katie, thanks for all the hard work you did over there, and Darcy for putting that together. And that is not an easy task to try to adjust this code, because it's, as you can see, there's a lot of really talented, smart people in this room, and we're all working towards a common goal. So I appreciate all the hard work, and I think everyone did a great job tonight.
Well said. Anything else on my left? Not seeing any on my right. Commissioner Kogler?
Just a question that Warren might cover. Can you give us a hint on when the Landings project will come before this group, so that I don't just have to have that notebook sitting there knowing I have to read it by some time in the future?
So originally we were thinking that we were going to be scheduling hearings this summer. That schedule is slipping, so I do believe we're probably looking at fall for a commission hearing, but you can start reading it as soon as you want.
Thank you.
Commissioner Christensen?
Yes, I would be okay with moving the DRC half an hour. That doesn't bother me whatsoever. I don't know how the other commissioners feel about it. And yeah, great job. I really appreciate when the public comes in and they make comment, especially because this is a really tricky one. You guys really do have your hands full on this particular item. And I want to thank everybody for their input. One question to staff, and maybe Darren was looking into it, but did we get any follow up on the food places, the pop up food places in commercial parking lots and various things that I didn't know if we had anything on that. So if we could just, we could get a follow-up on that maybe next time to see where that's at. If we want clarification, just email me.
So we're still working with code enforcement to find out if they can, these pop-ups are happening late in the evening, so after 5 o'clock, so City Hall staff is gone, and it's complaint-driven most of the time. So getting the information, the pictures that we received, there's no signage, it's a tent, really, it's easy up, right? And so there's no insignia on the, to let staff know, if they have a business license or not. So we're still working with code enforcement. Piper actually may have more of an update because I think she was specifically talking to Stephanie, who's our community services officer. Do you have any more information on this?
Yeah. So in talking to Stephanie, the biggest thing is if they're in the public right of way, that's when there's a little bit more intervention in terms of going up and seeing if they have their county health inspection and if they have their license certificate. And then if they have their business license, but they're not mandated to have their business license on them. Therefore, it typically takes her to go back to the office, look into it, check it out, and then kind of report after that. Again, if it's on public right away, it's typically hey, unfortunately you can't be here. Would you mind relocating or packing up for the day? If it is on private property, it's a little bit different because that is allowed, but with property owner's consent and with appropriate permitting requirements and regulations. So she's kind of diverted it into those two types in terms of when she's going out and doing active enforcement. It doesn't seem like from her perspective, she gets a lot of calls or complaints or anything on the spot on the day that she goes out, but they are aware of them and they do go out and monitor for them when they have the time and the capacity.
Okay, thank you. Darcy, you got something else?
And just one more thing to add. So if we do have somebody routinely showing up at the same site, the rule of thumb would be, I want to say it's 7 consecutive days or more, or 7 days or more, I think in a calendar year, so it doesn't even have to be consecutive. They need to get a temporary use permit. So then staff works with them. We need a site plan, they're easy up. I don't know that's not defined as a food truck. So, there might be a little bit more work for them to do, but we could legitimize it. So these, at this point, it's not from what Piper has said, our community services officer is working with these kind of pop-up ones and handling them as needed. But if, at this point, it doesn't sound like a lot of them are probably, going through business licensing or
Yeah, and I think most of them, are on private property and don't even know if the owners know that they're there. I mean, that would, because it's commercial or it's a vacant lot or, something. Some places you can really tell that that's probably, that's sub part of the business, so to speak, right? But okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Question.
Commissioner Roden?
So you don't have to have your business license on your place of business?
So I'm unfamiliar with the standard. From what I heard Piper say is that there's only some instances where, or they don't have to have it on their person. Is that
for most food trucks, they tend to ask for the, They tend to ask for the county health inspection card, and that's what they regulate. And then their business license, if they have it on file, they're not regulated to have it on the vehicle. That's my understanding. This conversation was a couple weeks ago, so I can always circle back on it. And that's something, again, if we're kind of looking at following up and seeing what we can do in the future, it could be something that we could.
That might be something that we need to add.
Thank you for that. So my only comment is I want to thank staff. I think you guys assisted us tremendously by having the draft to kind of get us started on, looking at some of the recommendations. So thank you, staff, for the work that you guys helped in actually getting us started and looking at some of these changes. And of course, again, Katie, for writing so fast. And you got great penmanship, by the way, for as fast as you write. Yeah, exactly. So staff comments. Warren?
Yes, wanted to thank everybody that was able to show up to the Sunrise Villas ribbon cutting last week. So that was the affordable apartments out there at the Olson South Chandler specific plan, so that's fully occupied. We do expect a ribbon cutting for the River Walk Terrace project in the Walmart Shopping Center, probably in May. So those are two really nice workforce, senior, affordable projects that are coming online right now, right when we need them. A couple update items. We are getting ready to bring before you an update to the Olson specific plan for the planning area number 2. That's the townhouses that will surround the apartment, the Sunrise Villas apartment site. So planning staff's been working on that for about 6 months with the developer. So we think that's now ready. So we'll have that scheduled probably for an April hearing. And then the Niblick Bikeway. So the Planning Commission made a recommendation to the City Council on the CEQA document. You also expressed some concerns about the urban design elements. So what's happened is the council certified the CEQA document, which is good. We need that to move forward with the grant funding. And and they referred the design issue back to staff for additional analysis. The city managers basically decided we need an ad hoc committee. So he has basically appointed 3 commissioners, Kogler, Christensen, and Covarrubias, to serve on an ad hoc to review the urban design elements of the Niblick Bikeway project. And then we'll probably be having some workshops and some feedback, and then probably be making a new recommendation to the City Council. So I think our next meeting on that will be or our first meeting for that ad hoc will be early April. And then as that evolves, we'll keep the rest of the commission posted on the results there. And then let's see, the Creston auto repair use, that's that CUP that's been out of compliance for a while. You guys visited that last year. Planning staff's working with the DRC to get that ready. There's still some issues to be resolved there, but once that's done at DRC, we'll get that back to the Planning Commission for a final decision. And then finally, we had a public comment in February, I believe, regarding some large skeletons off of Union Road. So just an update on that item. That was determined to be a violation of it was determined it fell under Title IX, which is kind of the nuisance section of the municipal code, which is administered basically by the CSOs and the police department. But the police department at this point, in consultation with the city attorney, has determined those do not violate that code section. So at this point, the determination's been that those are not a violation. There won't be any further action at this time. So I know you guys asked for an update on that item, so that is the latest on that item. And that'll conclude staff's report.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Warren. I just thought of something. That building that is across from Flamson, the one that has been back to us numerous times, I don't think it's moved progress. Is there any update on? I mean, I think they've wrapped it a couple times, and every time during the winter it comes unwrapped and it looks horrible.
Yeah, there was a little bit of work that started again middle of last year and then quickly ceased. There hasn't been any work. The building department, the building official, has been working with the city attorney's office to get an inspection warrant to move. So we're moving towards some sort of enforcement process. So the first step in the process is a formal court-ordered inspection warrant, because we can't get permission to get on the property right now. Once we have the inspection warrant, then it will start to move through a process. So we're well aware of it. City attorney and staff are working on it, but it will be a long, lengthy process to resolve.
So I have a question. If it is known that all of a sudden some of our homeless start to take occupancy inside, would that then give the city a chance to do something quicker?
If it became a nuisance or hazard like that, then the police department or fire department could take immediate action. They actually are monitoring it, and they're confident that's not an issue right now. So all we have is basically abandoned construction as the issue right now. If it became a nuisance with folks living in it or something, we can take care of that.
Got it.
So if you become aware or see anything, please let us know.
Okay. All right, appreciate that. Thank you for that update. Okay, if there's no other comments or questions, can I get a motion to adjourn, please? We got so moved by Christensen. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Adjourned 7:51. Thank you, guys.